Welcome to The Debate.
It's good to be here.
I want to start today with a provocation that is, honestly, it's terrifying. There is a specific claim in the source material we're looking at today that says, quite literally, your manager determines your mental health more than your doctor does.
It is a heavy statement, and it sounds like hyperbole until you actually look at the actuarial data on stress.
Exactly. But we aren't just talking about stress levels or, needing a therapy session after work. We are talking about the trajectory of your entire life's wealth. We're dissecting the boss filter hypothesis.
Which is, in essence, the argument that who you work for, that specific human being, matters more than the company name on your resume or the zeros on your paycheck.
Right. The hypothesis is that prioritizing a manager's quality, and specifically their empathy and their ability to create psychological safety, over a prestigious brand, the logo, or even a higher starting salary, is actually the superior economic strategy for maximizing lifetime earnings.
And that is where I have to, tap the brakes. Look, I agree that bad bosses are a health hazard. We've all had them, and we know the toll that takes. But I worry this boss filter concept is over-indexing on feelings at the expense of structural career strategy.
How so?
Because nice doesn't always pay the mortgage. I'm arguing that if you want to maximize the return on investment for your human capital, you shouldn't just be looking for safety. You need to be looking for sponsorship and the ability to make bold moves. You can have a boss who is incredibly empathetic, holding your hand while the ship sinks, or, while your career stagnates, because they just lack the institutional power to pull you up.
I think you're underestimating the damage a bad boss does to your capacity to move up. I would argue the immediate supervisor is the primary architect of your human capital. They act as the slope of your earning curve. And if that slope is flat because you're in a toxic environment, no amount of structural maneuvering is going to save you.
Well, we'll see about that. The data suggests that structural factors, specifically sponsorship and what McKinsey calls organizational health, are the true drivers of career velocity. You can have a great boss in a bad system, and you will still lose.
All right, let's get into the numbers then, because the math on this is startling. The labor market currently operates on a fundamental irrationality. We fixate on logos, Google, Goldman Sachs, whatever the flavor of the month is, and we fixate on starting salaries.
Which is rational behavior. I mean, if Company A offers me $6,000 more than Company B, I take the money. That's just basic economics.
In the short term, sure, it's extra cash in your pocket today. But human capital, your ability to earn money over time, it compounds just like interest in a savings account. The source material suggests that taking that higher salary under a toxic leader can result in a loss of lifetime earnings between $900,000 and $1 million.
Okay, hold on. $1 million. That is a massive delta. You're attributing all of that just to the personality of the manager?
Primarily, yes, because of a concept called skills that persist.
Break that down for us.
Well, think of a good boss as an educator. The research shows that roughly 25% of the performance gains you achieve under a high-quality boss remain with you for at least a year after you leave them. You keep the upgrade. You've learned better habits, better workflows, better communication.
So you take the good boss with you, effectively.
The trade, you're learning how to survive. You're learning how to dodge emails, hide mistakes, and manage an ego. That permanently lowers your future wage bargaining power because you haven't actually acquired marketable skills. You are actively depreciating your own asset.
I see the logic on the depreciation. If you're stressed, you're not learning. But I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning as a total strategy. The boss filter, as you define it, seems to conflate mentorship with sponsorship.
You view them as distinct?
Oh, they are night and day. And this is where people get stuck. Mentorship is teaching. It's advice. It's what you're describing, learning skills. Sponsorship is power.
Go on.
The Center for Talent Innovation ran the numbers on this, and they found that sponsors, not mentors, are the ones who directly affect promotions and salary increases. See, mentorship is about guidance. It's private. Sponsorship is about advocacy. It's public. It's when someone puts their reputation on the line for you when you aren't in the room to fight for your raise.
I don't deny the value of sponsorship. It is clearly critical for vertical movement.
But here's the rub. A boss can meet all your criteria for the boss filter. They can be kind, safe, supportive, a great teacher. But if they lack the political capital to be a sponsor, your ROI is capped. Furthermore, if we look at the McKinsey data on experience seekers, we see that the top quintile of earners are people who make bold moves. They change roles frequently.
So you're saying stability is the enemy?
I'm saying comfort is the enemy. If you filter too heavily for a safe boss, you might fall into what the data calls the lock-in effect. You get comfortable, you stay too long, and your wages stagnate. You need movement to drive value.
I think we're debating the mechanism of growth here. Let's look at the core economics of human capital again. So McKinsey's data indicates that work experience accounts for an average of 46% of a person's total human capital. That is, their lifetime earnings.
Agreed. Experience is the dominant factor, especially for those without advanced degrees. It outweighs formal education significantly as you age.
Right? So nearly half your wealth is driven by what you learn on the job. Who manages that portfolio? Your boss. They're the conduit. They determine if you get to try the new software, lead the high-stakes project, or just sit in the corner doing data entry. And we see a clear boss quality distribution. Moving from an average boss to one in the 90th percentile raises worker productivity by 50%.
50%? That is an enormous jump in output.
It goes from 10 units to 16 units per hour in the study. That productivity is what builds the portfolio of experience. If your boss blocks that flow because they're insecure or incompetent, your 46% asset stops growing. You're losing compound interest every single day.
That is a compelling argument for the boss as a gatekeeper. But have you considered how that experience accumulates? It's not just about doing the same job better under a nice teacher. It's about skill distance.
Clarify that for our listeners.
Skill distance is a measure of how different a new role is from your previous one. Think of it like muscle confusion in the gym. If you just keep lifting the same weight, you plateau. The McKinsey findings on experience seekers show that the people with the highest wage growth are those who make moves with high skill distances. They stretch. They jump from being a welder to a production manager.
That is a huge jump.
It is. And my concern with the boss filter is that it prioritizes the environment over the movement. You might learn more from a tough, demanding boss who pushes you into a high-skill distance role than a nice boss who keeps you in a low-skill distance role because, they don't want to stress you out.
But that assumes you can survive the tough boss long enough to learn the skill. This brings me back to the exit tax. Bad bosses increase turnover. And when you churn through jobs because of toxicity, you destroy the compounding interest of career growth. You aren't building skill distance, you're just fleeing. You are starting over at zero every 18 months, learning new names, new passwords, new politics, but not new skills.
Turnover is bad, I grant you. But let's talk about why people flee. You mentioned the manager versus doctor claim earlier.
Yes, your manager determines your mental health more than your doctor does. And this isn't hyperbole. Look at the study from Lebanon. This was in a crisis economy, really high stress. They found a leader's self-regulation and empathy were the most potent predictors of employee performance.
Sure, in a crisis you need a steady hand.
It goes beyond that. Google's Project Aristotle, their massive study on effective teams, found the same thing. Psychological safety is the #1 factor in high-performing teams. It outranks education. It outranks experience. If you don't have safety, you don't have access to the neural resources required to learn. Your brain is in fight or flight mode. You physically cannot accumulate human capital because your amygdala has hijacked your prefrontal cortex.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy the popular interpretation of that. Psychological safety has been hijacked to mean comfort. It's become a buzzword for don't make me feel bad.
How would you define it then?
I would defer to Amy Edmondson, who actually coined the term. Psychological safety is about interpersonal risk-taking. It's the belief that the team is safe for speaking up about mistakes or offering a dissenting view without getting your head bitten off. It is not about being coddled or having a boss who constantly asks about your feelings.
I agree with that definition. It's about a lack of fear, not a lack of pressure.
But there's a danger in what I might call ruinous empathy. The source material notes that remote workers with highly empathetic leaders sometimes exhibit avoidant behaviors, watching TV, browsing social media, because the pressure is off. You need behavioral integration.
Which means?
To information sharing and, collaboration. If the boss filter just selects for a boss who is nice but doesn't challenge you to take risks, you aren't building human capital. You're just comfortable, and comfort is expensive in the long run. Comfort is where careers go to die.
I think you're creating a false dichotomy between empathy and high standards. You can have both. In fact, the data on emotional intelligence, the EI from the Leben study, showed that self-regulation, the boss's ability to control their own reactions, was critical. A boss who screams or shames, which is the opposite of the boss filter, shuts down the cognitive center of the employee. You can't have interpersonal risk-taking if the boss creates an environment of fear.
Fear is counterproductive, yes, we agree there. But let's look at who actually gets ahead. You mentioned mentorship earlier.
I did. 9 in 10 workers with a mentor say they're happier. Sales employees with mentors generate 19% more revenue. That's hard data.
It is, but let me hit you with some harder data. There's a sponsorship gap. And this is where the structural argument really weighs in. White employees are significantly more likely, 60%, to have advocacy than Black employees, who sit at 45%.
That is a systemic failure, absolutely.
It is, and it proves that mentorship, which is what the boss filter usually selects for, is insufficient for equity or for wealth. Mentorship is building you up. Sponsorship is moving you forward. A mentor talks to you, a sponsor talks about you.
That is a succinct way to put it.
My argument is that if you use the boss filter, you must filter for sponsorship capability. Does this person have the power to walk into a room you aren't in, an executive calibration meeting, and pound the table to get you a raise? If they're just nice and safe but powerless, you'll be happy and you'll be poor.
That is a sharp point. But I would argue that sponsorship rarely happens without the trust built by the boss filter criteria. Why would a leader put their reputation on the line for you, which is the definition of sponsorship, if they haven't established a relationship of trust and safety first?
They might do it because you're high-performing, regardless of whether they care about your feelings. Sponsorship is often transactional. It's a quid pro quo. I promote you, you make me look good.
But can you be high-performing in a vacuum? The skills that persist data suggest that the teaching component of the boss is what creates the high performer in the first place. The boss filter is the prerequisite for the competence that justifies the sponsorship. You can't sponsor a dud.
Perhaps, but we also have to look at where the boss sits. We need to talk about organizational health.
You mean the context the boss operates in, the water they swim in?
Exactly. McKinsey found that 37% of employees with early career experience in top quintile healthy organizations are upwardly mobile. Compare that to only 23% in bottom quintile firms.
That's a significant gap.
It is, and it suggests that a great boss in a bottom quintile firm, a dysfunctional, toxic company, is fighting a losing battle. You're prioritizing the leader over the logo, but sometimes the logo, or rather the organizational health behind it, provides the structural lift. If you choose a great boss on a sinking ship, you might learn some resilience, but you won't get the bold moves opportunities because the ship is going down.
That's fair. But let's bring this back to the individual decision maker listening to this right now. We can't always control the macro health of the organization. We can't always know if the ship is sinking until we're on it, but we can control who we work for directly. The source material provides a how-to for this. It's called the interview audit.
I'm always skeptical of interviews. Everyone lies. Candidates lie. Companies lie. It's a performance.
They try to. That you can ask specific questions to test the boss filter. It's like detective work. For example, if I asked the person I'm replacing what their biggest challenge was, what would they say?
That's a good one. It forces them to reveal friction points.
Exactly. If they say, oh, they just couldn't keep up with the pace, that's a red flag for burnout culture. If they say, we struggled to align on resources, that's honest. Another one is, how does leadership here handle pushback? If the answer is vague, or if they say, we don't really have pushback, everyone aligns quickly, run. That's code for authoritarianism.
I would add an organizational audit to that.
You need to ask questions that reveal the boss's power, their ability to sponsor. Ask, can you give me an example of someone on this team you've promoted in the last year?
Oh, I like that.
If they can't answer that, or if they fumble, they aren't a sponsor. They're just a supervisor. They might be nice, they might be safe, but they're a dead end. You need to verify if they have the institutional currency to pay for your advancement.
That's an excellent addition. It bridges our two positions effectively. You want to filter for a boss who is safe enough to learn from, but powerful enough to launch you.
Exactly. And I think we need to address the lifetime hours aspect too. The Federal Reserve data showed that variation in lifetime hours explains about 30% of earnings variation.
But that relationship isn't linear, right? Just working more doesn't always equal more money.
Right. Working more hours generally correlates with more earnings, but the boss filter determines if those are high leverage hours. A bad boss forces you to work high hours due to inefficiency, anxiety, or rework. Those are burnout hours.
Versus learning hours.
Correct. A good boss ensures those extra hours are spent acquiring skills or tackling high-skill distance projects. A bad boss ensures those hours are spent fixing their formatting errors or listening to them rant.
And that goes right back to the manager versus doctor point. Burnout hours destroy health. Skill acquisition hours build wealth. The boss filter is the only mechanism that distinguishes between the two. If you ignore the filter for a higher salary, you are essentially selling your health for a short-term cash injection that depreciates over time.
I'm not sure I would go that far. Some people thrive in high-pressure, low-empathy environments if the rewards are high enough. We call them mercenaries.
But even mercenaries have a shelf life. The exit tax eventually comes for everyone. You can only sprint on cortisol for so long before the crash. And when you crash, the doctor bills start piling up.
Maybe, but let's look at the experience seekers one last time. These people change roles every 2 to 4 years. They don't stay with one boss for a decade. They use the boss, extract the skills, and move. The boss filter might imply looking for a forever home, a place to nest, but the data suggests you should be looking for a launch pad.
I don't think the boss filter implies staying forever. It implies that while you are there, the environment facilitates growth. Remember skills that persist? The source mentions that 25% of the gains persist after you leave. You take the boss with you, in a sense. You take their methods, their standards, their way of thinking.
Like compounding interest on your own capability?
Precisely. And that's why the math works out to $1 million difference. It's not the salary bump. It is the compounding capability that you carry into every future negotiation. If you learned nothing for 3 years because you were terrified, you show up to your next negotiation empty-handed.
So as we wrap this up, where do we land?
For me, the conclusion is clear. Structural factors matter, of course, but the immediate manager is the lens through which an employee experiences the company. You can't enjoy organizational health if your daily reality is toxic. A bad boss destroys that 46% value of experience. The boss filter is your primary defense against the educational tax.
And I would nuance that. You must look for a sponsor, not just the boss. The highest ROI comes from bold moves and experience seeking. That requires a leader who will actively push you out of the nest and into new opportunities, rather than just making you feel safe in your current role. While the manager determines your health, sponsorship determines your wealth.
That is a powerful distinction. But I will remind our listeners of the core provocation we started with. Your manager determines your mental health more than your doctor does. You can't spend your wealth if you're broken.
Fair point. But I think we can agree on one thing. The logo, the brand name of the company, is the least important variable compared to the quality of the leader and the opportunity for sponsorship.
Absolutely. Don't choose the logo. Choose the human.
Choose the human who can open the door.
And with that, we will leave you to audit your own leadership situation. Thanks for listening to The Debate.